Yes.
Yeah.
I said it's right at 9.
It is, you got the full ballot.
The biggest concern I have about that is the turning of a red state, or at least a purple state, a solid blue when they do that,
Yeah.
which is happening in Texas.
And then they forget why they left.
Yeah. Now they're going to make here as bad as there.
Exactly.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Charlotte County Airport Authority Budget Workshop. Today is August 5th, 2021, and this meeting is hereby called to order. I'd like to remind everybody to silence or turn off your cell phones, please. And once again, this meeting is called to order. We will start with an invocation and a pledge of allegiance, and those who would like to join us, please stand. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we take this time to praise your holy name. We just thank you for all that you do for us, the hedge of protection you provide for us, and we ask now that you grant this board wisdom and guidance as we consider our yearly budget. And we once again give you the honor and the glory of our success. And in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Hansick.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner. Miss Amy, roll call, please.
Mr. Andrews is absent, but Miss Oliver? Here. Mr. Carp?
Present.
Mr. Hurston?
Present.
Mr. Parrish?
Here?
Mr. Hansick?
Here.
Ms. Coppola?
Here.
Thank you, Amy. At this point, we're asking for citizens' input. If there were anybody who would like to approach the board here, if you state your name and your business. Okay, I see nobody coming. We'll close that item. Mr. Parrish, your budget presentation.
Certainly. I want to thank the board members who were able to come in. It's a lot easier to go through this one-on-one, answer some questions, and then bring all those answers back to you. Fortunately, we didn't have a lot of questions, but I want to present the preliminary 2021-2022 fiscal year budget. What you see in front of you right now are the revenue projections for the year. You received these. They may be slightly different as we've been tweaking things, but you received this as well as all the detail that feeds into these numbers in your packets. The first line is the 2022 budget. The second line or second column is the forecast with 9 months actual data and 3 months forecasted out for the 2021 year-end budget. The next column is the variance of the two, and the last two are the 2021 actual budget and the variance between 2021 and 2022. I'll point out that the fiscal year 2021 revenues are exceeding our forecasted revenues thanks to travel actually happening again. We were very conservative in 2021 with both revenues and expenses, and you'll see that going forward. 2022 will be a significant increase in both revenues and expenses. Not significant, but an increase in both as we catch up on some deferred things that we did not do last year because of the pandemic and the uncertainty in the markets, as well as we catch up on some revenues that we did not have this year. So I want to go to the next slide unless there's any questions. We will also come back to these at the end. If you have any questions, just jot them down and we can get into it. Again, same columns. These are the expenses. You will note the largest increase is in, one of the largest increases, it's a significant increase for us, is in salaries and wages. We did not increase wages last year. We are now in a market where we are having to move people to full-time that were part-time. We are having to pay significantly more for labor, for skilled labor, specifically in building maintenance and airfield maintenance, electricians, HVAC people are much more expensive now than they were 2-3 years ago. So we have gone through and done a salary survey of the local airports, counties, cities, and redone our salary scales. And so this is showing that, reflective of that change to every pay scales for each individual category of employment. So that's, go back, yeah. But you can see the other expenses are pretty much on track. There are some repairs and maintenance that are going up. Some of that was deferred from this year, and you'll see that as we go forward. But computer maintenance as well, I think those are the two biggest ones you'll see increases in. And then our airline-related expenses, and those are tied directly to our revenues because it's a per employment expense. So, next slide. For non-operating, these are things that you don't see compared in our above the line. PFCs, CFCs, those are directly correlated with actual employments, and then so you can see how that goes in. Now, none of this has any of our grants in it. This is just actual operating and non-operating income. These are monies that we actually receive. They're not tied to any grants like the CARES, the CARISA, ARPA, or any just regular AIP grants. So, well, there we go. So you continue. That's fine. Depreciation. I'm sorry. I'm breathing. We will have some capital improvements next year. This does not include 422, which was included in last year's budget, even though the expenses will probably happen this year because it's 100% AIP. It won't affect the actual budget or our capital cash on hand. That project did bid last week or this week, and it came in slightly below estimates, which was surprising because we increased our estimates based on what we were seeing at other bids, and the FAA was trying to find the extra money, and it was actually below our original estimate. So we were excited for that. We had 3 very close bids within 34,000 of each other. So I think we're good. Unless anyone has any specific questions on this, we'll go through the slides, and then we can come back to this at the end. Go ahead.
Well, hearing no question, let's go through the slides, James.
All right. So we'll go through a little bit of what we do and our revenue sources and our revenue streams. Fuel is obviously very important to the airport. We run and we operate an exclusive on the FBO. We pump a little over 1 million gallons a month total. Most of it goes into the airline, which is a small return of 2 cents a gallon, and that is actually being rebated back to them to pay for the improvements they made to the fuel farm. That should be paid off next year, Ron?
18 months.
18 months. So we're very close to paying that off. Jet A, GA Jet A, and GA Avgas, you can see are a much smaller number. Let's go to the next slide. So this is our profit from GA fuel sales, and you'll note that we, because of self-serve, because of our markup on Avgas, we make very little in Avgas by design. We want to keep the cost of flying as low as possible for the GA community. We're blessed with over 400 based aircraft, and we would like to see at least half of them in the sky. But Jet A, GA Jet A is more of the business traffic that flies in here. They're coming to Punta Gorda because they need to be in Punta Gorda, and they don't fly here because of fuel prices like the GA community does. So we get a little higher margin on that. we get about half the margin that Naples does, but Naples has a lot more jet traffic than we do. They're pumping about 500,000 gallons a month GA jet, and that's going up. Next slide. Talk about emplanements. Since most of our revenues are tied directly to emplanements, you can see 2009 to 2022 projections. We took a big hit in 2020. 2021 is coming back nicely. And we're projecting 2022 based on Allegiant, Sun Country flights that they have told us they're flying, plus a projection for the last few months of the year, about 912,000 emplanements. Now if you watched Mr. Redmond say there will be over 2 million passengers in 2022, that would be 1 million emplanements, so he may know something we don't yet.
James, you base the emplanements on our fiscal or calendar, FAA calendar?
This is based on our fiscal year.
Which
is
is
truly the emplanements that we report to the FAA are calendar year. Okay. We have no idea why the FAA does half one way and half the other, but yeah, they should, end the year about the same.
So the emplanements track with our budget that way?
Emplanements track with the budget,
Gotcha.
yes. All right, next slide. Again, just a distribution of emplanements. I think we're being conservative in the last few months, and that's the months that we really don't have data from the airlines yet. We'll have that January, February, and then this is something we constantly update. Heather updates the budget every time we get a new city announcement, every time we get a new schedule. We go through and just true everything up to make sure we're doing what we expect to do. So this shows our typical peak in February, March, and April, and then drop off in August and September, which is Florida. This is what everybody's airport looks like. Well, hopefully we'll never have that April drop that we had in 20 again, but we will definitely continue to prepare with cash on hand for anything like that.
Well, that was the COVID.
That was COVID.
Yeah.
That was the terrible closing of the country for 2 weeks that has ended up being about a year. Next slide. I'm not going to politicize anything. So these are more revenue streams. Parking lots, which is a significant revenue stream for us. We do own, operate, and maintain our own parking lots. So we get to keep 100% of the money, which also means we have to fund all the capital improvements, all the maintenance, and the equipment. We raised rates 5 years ago, and we have been putting that money aside for the maintenance going forward. We don't have any rate increases planned. That $3.4 million is based on emplanements from previous year numbers. With the new parking lot open, we're seeing some additional income per emplaned passenger. That is not included in this because we just don't have enough history. But we're capturing income that we were losing before when we were parking in the grass. So that is definitely helping. And a lot of the cost of shuttling we were already doing because we were having to take people to grass lots where we were not collecting any income. And we were renting light towers and bringing in tow trucks to pull people out of mud. So hopefully all that is gone. We have 1,000 new spaces, and it is working fairly well. Next slide. Car rental concession. The car rentals have been a little strange this year. Although we've rented fewer cars, we've made more money because the cost per car rental has gone up. We're kind of projecting somewhere in the middle for next year based on past experiences and current experience. The car rental market should be getting more cars once this chip shortage is solved, if it ever is, and Ray gets his new truck. But we're kind of hedging our bets on that one. We know there will be cars rented. Whether they'll be $200 a day or $19 a day is what we don't know.
They were very expensive.
They are very expensive right now. And I feel for Katie and Amy, who field the phone calls of people irated us because the cars cost so much. But I know people that were in industry meetings were saying in Hawaii, people were renting Ryder trucks because it was cheaper than renting a car at the airport. But we will have Hertz back next September 1st. The corporate called us and said they're coming back. We had to kind of force that issue because we were about to allocate spaces, and they would have gotten very few space allocations based on last year's usage.
They're coming back when?
September 1.
Is that across the country?
That's here,
But it's corporate here.
but corporate, yes. You know, we did approve them bringing in a locally owned store. Corporate decided to keep this at
Keep it
corporate
back.
airport, yeah. So they'll be back. Next slide. So this is just, it kind of shows our total revenue per enplaned passenger from our operating cash streams. This doesn't include some things, but the orange is terminal rents, vending, which includes our ATM machine, a few other small things, badging, we charge a badging fee. This doesn't include the cost of the badging. Our law enforcement grant that we get from the TSA to have a Leo on site during hours of TSA operation. Our ground transportation charges, which are the $3 per pickup for the taxi companies, and as well as Uber, Lyft, and anybody else. We are currently in negotiations with Turo, so that's encouraging. We'll be one of the first airports to have a Turo agreement if we can get that through. Tampa was the first, and we're hoping we'll be right alongside. I think us pushing through that rules and regs a couple of months ago kind of forced the issue with them. But what's interesting here is really how our auto parking and car rental ebb and flow. You know, we want to maintain about a $12 per enplaned passenger income, and as car rentals go down, parking lot income goes up, and then vice versa. So we really see a nice distribution throughout the year, the enplaned passenger income. So, and that's important. That's important that we track all of that, make sure that car rentals aren't being impacted too much by Uber and Lyft. And you know, I think our demographics right now are playing in our favor. People are more comfortable driving. People are more comfortable with their own car or renting a car than they are with Uber and Lyft. The pandemic has played a little bit of that. People are just not comfortable getting in a car with a stranger. As we all grew up saying, our parents saying, don't get in a car with strangers. Now we call strangers on our phone and have them pick us up. So next slide. So this is our direct and indirect expenses as compared to our income streams for the airport, or for the terminal basically. The operating revenues are the revenues we saw on the previous page, the PFC, the CFC. Entitlements, which we get per enplaned passenger, all kind of feed into, you know, the total. All of this isn't completely unrestricted. Monies we get, they're for projects, for airport development. The CFCs are new. They're, you know, a charge that we can use for a lot of things, but they come from the rental car. So next year we're projecting about a $16 net after our $6.50 cost. This year about $15.8 per enplaned passenger. Next slide. So get into the pie charts. These are always interesting to somebody. They do give us a lot of, you know, the pie gets bigger and smaller, but we want to maintain some of these percentages. So this is our current fiscal year. Operating revenues shows all of the the revenue streams and the airline-related auto parking, car rentals, food and beverage, fuel sales to the ground transportation company, as well as to the car rental companies, Worldwide Flight and everybody. The ground transportation, which is taxis and then terminal leases. It's about 70%, and then the rest is T hangars, about 6%, hangars, tie downs, other hangars, miscellaneous avgas sales, jet fuel sales, kind of wind up everything else. One thing I'd like to point out, if we took the 70% away, half the people in the room wouldn't be here, but we break down fairly well when you look at a small GA airport, what is airport related and what is industrial park or non-airport related. Our income streams are fairly diverse for a small airport. For a larger growing airport, the largest income stream is always airline. I do have some ideas for next year for the industrial park. I'd like to do some marketing and maybe hire a broker to work with us on that. So I'll bring that up later. Not during this, but we are thinking of some ways to get that jump started now that industrial development seems to be booming in the area, and we've had a lot of interest. So I mean, these things take a long time, as you see with the Publix land still sitting there with cows on it. The next slide shows fiscal year 22, and while airline-related revenues are a larger piece of the pie, the whole pie is bigger. And as you saw with car rentals and parking, those are going up only because the employments are going up. So the pie is bigger, but that revenue is growing because employments are growing. This does not include new T hangars. This does not include new box hanger rentals, new tie-down rentals. So those weren't factored in here because we don't know when they'll actually hit. And that could increase that other part of the pie. And we're excited about getting those going pretty soon. Next slide, we'll go into expenses. Obviously, the biggest expense of running most any business right now is personnel, and I think we're blessed with the staff we have. We have a lot of long-term employees. We've been able to steal some great employees from other airports, and but at the same time, keep our personnel expenses in line with our growth. We'll just hop on to next year. You'll see the personnel expenses, maybe next year. It's gone up 1%. Well, it's gone up $1 million+, but it is only 1% increase in the total revenue of the airport. Airline-related expenses, that includes all of our terminal expenses, mostly, I think about 50% of that's toilet paper, cleaning supplies, air conditioning, electric, everything that goes into the terminal is in there. Utilities is the rest of the airport's utilities. Run the airfield and all the other buildings. Insurance, repairs and maintenance is one that's going up. We are doing some maintenance that we deferred from this year because we just didn't know how the budget was going to work out next year, so that's increasing. But as a total, we're trying to keep track of everything. And one thing you'll see in there is the total expenses does not include the cost of the fuel we buy, so we can kind of take that out. The revenue is the fuel we sell without the cost of the goods, and the expenses is everything without the cost. Because what we pay for it really doesn't matter, it's the margin we make on it. All right, next slide. I want to talk a little bit about cash on hand. We have been very fortunate since 2005 when we were
Barely made the chart.
Barely made the chart, barely had any money in the bank.
Isn't that when I kind of came on the board?
It's all you, Mr. Hansick. It's all you.
I will tell you, in October 2005, I came. And so Heather came. So this is the Heather James era. We have been very fortunate. We've been very fortunate with grants. We've been very fortunate with the operations of the airport covering all of our expenses. And, that helped us in 2020 when they gave out CARES grants. They had what I call a divide by zero error. And when they did that, they gave you a set amount. And because we were fortunate enough to be in that category, we were one of the airports that got a large amount of cash. They have corrected some of that in the next few grants to kind of help out the airports that didn't get as much, but we've still been very fortunate in those. So that's what you're seeing in the projected year end of 2021 and projected 2022.
But don't you think they see what we do with the money we get, which is so great?
One would think, but no. The FDOT does.
Yeah.
The DOT looks at return on investment and for their dollars, and they definitely reward us. I can tell you when Elaine Chow announced these numbers, she had no idea who Punta Gorda was. The ADO does, but they don't set the numbers. So we're going to need to spend a little cash. This does include our T-hangar development in our projections. So I'm going to look next year at some potential partnerships with some industrial site developers that maybe they can come in, we can partner on a building and lease it out. I'm following real closely some construction in Northport and Sarasota, as well as in North Fort Myers. They're building some flex space, some large flex space. Yeah. And I'd like to see how that rents out. One of the disadvantages that we have, as a commercial developer, you generally develop, you lease it. If your return is somewhat greater than zero, you can then sell it. We can't sell it. So we have to have a return almost immediately to start putting it back on the books to cover our depreciation in the building, even though our depreciation doesn't mean anything. Sorry, Sandy. So it's a little different for us as an airport, but I'm following the construction around the area very closely because I think we have some opportunities, and the cash in the bank is going to give us opportunities to move forward both on aviation and non-aviation infrastructure development. So.
Is any of that cash restricted only for aeronautical purposes, or?
No. So the internal reserves, or what we used to call internally restricted accounts, is the stuff that we put aside. And go to the next screen. I think we can show that, maybe. Yes. So these are our internal reserve balances, and these are things that we put aside. We have a reserve building fund to do roofs, to do pavement, T-hangar reserves to do the work we're going to do next year on the T-hangar doors. Parking lot reserves, that was every penny of that increase that the board approved a few years ago. And we have taken it down to build more parking, although we did not use any of it to build the new 1,000 spaces because we didn't need to. So we left it in there. We'll use some next year to update some of our equipment. Almost all of our equipment is new. I think we have one lot left that we need to update. Our air traffic and navigation reserves, fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, we own almost all of the nav systems on the airport, up to and including our ILS. We have one of the only private ILSs at a commercially serviced airport in the nation. I've been trying to get the FAA to take it over. We will be continuing to ask our legislators to help us get the FAA to take that over. But at this point, we maintain it. We maintain our VOR. We maintain 3 of the 4 PAPIs, 3 of the 4 reels. So there is an expense. We do put money aside every year to maintain that, as well as to upgrade it or replace it as necessary. We had a major lightning strike during Hurricane Elsa on our tower. Everything from the generator to the elevator were damaged. Fortunately, none of the major infrastructure, the navigation aids that are inside the computers, none of that was damaged, but the elevator was the biggest thing because air traffic controllers don't like to use stairs. So, but go back to the previous slide. So as you see, the PFC account, that's restricted. And that's the only real restricted account in there, although we have an approved PFC plan out for another 5 years, and pretty much all of the money is spent on projects. We are going to be very fortunate at the end of next year that all of our pavement will be less than 10 years old, which on a 20-year life cycle for pavement is going to be pretty exciting for an airport our size. Once 422 is completed and taxiway Delta is completed. So next slide, and we can go to the next one. So this is 2021 projects. These are things that were in the works and are still in the works for 2021. You can see there was about $4.5 million of Punta Gorda Airport cash. Some reimbursables, those are funds that we'll expend now and be reimbursed later, mostly DOT and some PFC reimbursements in the green at the bottom. But that includes the new long-term parking lot, which we completed, runway 1533 and Woodlawn relocation, the ramp and taxiway for the Punta Gorda Air Center. We're going to talk about that at the next meeting. Sorry, Kaylee. The GAC Phase 1 terminal, which is currently under construction. You can go out there if you have four-wheel drive and look at it. Building 207, which is the building on the ramp that we'll be relocating to the general aviation area. And then runway 422 rehab, which is a project that just built a bid. So that'll start construction next fiscal year, but the monies were allocated to this year. We'll go to the next year and look at the same kind of breakdown. Taxiway Delta, some north apron rehab. We need to redo some grip flex, maybe do a slight mill and overlay on some areas in there. Rental car improvements to their parking. And I'll tell you, all the rental cars are under evaluation right now because we're looking at some other options. And we'll bring those back to the board for discussion at a later meeting. And the FBO hangar and some storage buildings around the FBO for the storage of our GSE equipment. And so a total of about $12.25 million. The majority of that is, again, other people's money. It's the FDOT, the FAA, CFC, and PFC money to us that we've collected and spent. About $1.8 million is actually cash from the airport. So, next slide. Operating revenue versus expenses, something that I am and Heather, and if anyone noticed, Heather's not here. There's an outbreak in her family, so she is staying at home to keep us all healthy. But the revenues and expenses, we follow closely to maintain the delta between them. And as you can see, they're both increasing next year, both increasing fairly rapidly, but the delta between them is staying fairly consistent. You also look at the very bottom, which is our salaries, and you can see how that's been pretty level throughout the years. And then the last few years, with increase of staff, with increase of full-time employees, and some salary increases, that's going up. But if you are out there running a business today, labor costs are one of our biggest hurdles. Not only are we paying more, we're having a harder time finding the people we're paying. So we are interviewing as many as, well, we're offering interviews to as many as 15 people per opening, and we probably get 2 or 3 that walk through the door.
Really?
Next slide. So this is interesting only if you're a numbers geek. This is our projected budget gains versus actual, and you'll note that we have generally been a little more conservative than actual. We're trying to get this closer and closer as we really hone in the numbers, and Heather and I go through the budget numbers and our passenger numbers monthly as we get all the data, and then we use that to project forward with the budget for the next year. You can see 2020, we blew it. We didn't know we were going to blow it, but we had a slight dip in traffic that we couldn't predict. 2021, we also predicted the traffic to stay low, but it didn't, so it was higher. I think next year we'll be back to our 17, 18 type of numbers where we're pretty close to budget versus actual. Next slide. Something that means a lot to our auditors, doesn't mean much to me because we're never going to sell anything or pay taxes on it, is depreciation. Through the years, we have fought to cover depreciation, and that is the O&M after depreciation is if you really looked at our numbers, if you were an investor in the airport, you would see that we didn't cover depreciation for the majority of our existence. 2018 was the first year that we did cover. 19, 20 we did not. 21 we will, and 22 we will again. So while I don't consider that a major concern, because we're not depreciating buildings for tax purposes and then taking that off the books, that would be the only reason you would be worried about it. We do cover maintenance through our other sources, the reserve cash that we have to replace parking lots, to replace lighting, to replace HVAC, to replace roofs. After 20 years, the terminal is still going to be a terminal, and it'll still have a cash value. It won't be zero. So these numbers are a little arbitrary to an engineer, to an accountant. They mean a lot. But next slide. Total operating revenues. So you will see the 2005 to 2022, the Heather James era, as Heather likes to call it, have been pretty good. We've had a dip in 2009 with the loss of direct air, and then we started picking up with Allegiant in 2010, where they became our dominant carrier, and you can see the numbers continue to increase. And I think that is projected to continue for a number of years as Allegiant has rededicated itself to the Sunseeker project, which will mean they will be a major contributor to the community financially for a long time. So I think that's the last slide. If we can get back to the budget numbers, if you guys have any specific questions, let's go through some tidbits. The board approved board travel a few years ago at $2,500 without having to come back to the board for approval. We did increase that to $3,500 this year just because travel expenses have gone up. Hotels have gone up, so if the board approves the budget, there is that increase in there. So each member would have $3,500 of travel without getting full board approval to exceed that amount. There's a 4% raise for staff. There is a 5% bonus if we meet our goals, included in the salaries and wages, and there is a 2.5% increase in insurance this year, which is reasonable based on last few years.
The health insurance?
Mm-hmm. Marketing has gone up a little. Repairs and maintenance has gone up. Marketing will mostly be for the General Aviation Center kickoff, the new restaurant. Repairs and maintenance is a lot of doors. And then do we have the capital slide? Can we bring that up?
Are you talking about the chart?
Yes, that breaks it.
This one, but I can pull up
So revenues and expenses are pretty much, set. We do have capital expenses, anything over $5,000 aren't included in here. Now, that doesn't include paper, toilet paper, stuff like that, but building maintenance, computers, monitors, things that are above and beyond this. And we have a slide that just kind of breaks down our expenses for the next year by everything we're doing. It's nice and pretty in color.
Hold on. I got deleted from the meeting, so I got to put it from my email. Right.
Do you have the list that's color-coded? Well, I'd like for her to pull it up so they can all see it.
While she's looking for that, on the capital side, 927, we're going to do anything there, or?
We are going to.
We talked about
We're
it,
gonna-
but I don't know whether the decision was in
So
it.
we change ordered our current contract
Okay, now I
to take
know.
out the taxiway to the end.
Right.
So that is being constructed now, so that was a big improvement that we never had. The 422 contract will change order to add the pavement. We didn't have enough pavement in this one that it wouldn't be a major increase. In the next one we do, so we'll do a mill and overlay of 927 during the 422 contract. Just a mill and overlay,
You can't push it a little?
maybe at 2 or 3 feet.
Okay. I know why.
I tried
But
during the master plan to do it,
they wouldn't buy it.
just couldn't get there.
Sorry about that, James.
So those are, some general aviation things, but.
No, not that one.
Yeah, not that one.
Are you looking for the one with the actual budget on it?
Do you have you could show it to her, the list of,
You're looking for the list itself, not the PowerPoint slide then. Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I got to pull up and share that.
So we've broken it down next year into what we're spending at the General Aviation Center to open it. Obviously, we're getting a new building. We still need to put stuff in it. The maintenance facility, potential move, we're going to have to do some repairs and maintenance to that facility as well as some new equipment as we move into that. And then we're looking at upgrading all of the seating in the terminal. That'll either be in 1 year or 2 years.
That's expensive.
It's almost $750,000. And that does not include the power poles and things for charging, which everyone expects these days to have power at every seat. We'll be adding some of that. We're having a few different vendors look at it. I'm sure while you're at ACI, you can talk to all of them and tell them we're about to spend a lot of money and they'll give you seats. But, there we go.
I don't want to go there.
I know, the second you tell them. So,
Yeah.
so we've broken it down into little segments. Basically, the moving of the maintenance facility from its current location to the new location at the fuel farm, the General Aviation Center. You can see the totals there, access control, wireless, the fiber to get it over to it, switches, TVs. We are putting in some new radios next year. Our 800 megahertz radios are at the end of life, so we're getting new radios. But so about 150,000, we'll round 750,000 for the General Aviation Center, above and beyond the 8 million we're spending to build it. Terminal seating is about $750,000. We're obviously going to have to put that out to bid, but that's our budget number right now. And then the rest of it is a lot of things that we've been deferring for years. Some hangar door repair or some rust on the north side of all the 600 series T hangars because they don't get the sun. They tend to rust at the bottom. Not structural rust, it's in a panel that it's a drip edge that's designed to keep the water out of the hangars. We're going to look at seeing if we can do that with aluminum instead of galvanized, because the galvanized just is not holding up. Shades in the tower, they're at end of life, although they work pretty good. We're getting a power broom as construction increases, as traffic increases, we need to be able to clean the runways quicker than with manual brooms. We are finally getting a skid steer, which Mr. LaRoche has been asking for 10 years.
What's that?
A little Bobcat tractor to do smaller maintenance. We have a very large front end loader and we have a very small front end loader. This would be higher horsepower, middle size. Pressure washer trailer may or may not happen, but we want to put it in there in case we do need it. And then a major upgrade to some computers as well as monitors, switches. The switches these are IT switches. These are things that take the fiber loop to a copper loop and then back to fiber to go to other buildings. They've gotten more complex and more expensive through the years. But that's a total. Some more lighted runway closure markers. So we're not using ones from the two of ours I bought during a 2001 project that I designed for the airport. And the other two I bought used from Columbia, South Carolina.
With the completion of the new general aviation facility, does the Wi-Fi improve for the 600 series hangars? I guess I should ask Mr. Mallard that question.
So we used to provide Wi-Fi from the tower. We had two antennas pointing in two different directions. We had some interference crossing the runway with some nav aids. We no longer do that. If you get it, you're just lucky. Because it's
Well, you
just
got all that
airport.
conduit going out there. Just put the fiber in.
We will have fiber, and we will have a Wi-Fi antenna on the ramp for both our equipment, because our fuelers are going to be using tablets to order things.
And the customers.
And the customers will obviously have it inside. One of the nice things we're going to have inside the General Aviation Center is not only a nice facility, but we'll have a small meeting room where if you fly in for a real estate closing, you can meet your attorneys there, have it in the room. It'll seat about 12 people. Then we have two event rooms that we'll be able to expand and contract. One will be part of the restaurant, but the other will be ours. They can use it for events, we can use it for events, or go into the restaurant area. We could host the EDP luncheon, things like that here. So we're excited about that, but with that, we'll have to have increased internet and Wi-Fi, and that'll keep going down the road. So our fiber loop, we put in a fiber loop probably 10 years ago, and we've been expanding it. Eventually, as we get out to the end of 927, we'll have to loop it back to the vault, and then that'll complete. We have an internal loop, and that'll complete the external loop. The great thing about having it looped is if it gets cut, we can go the other direction. And that would require Tim moving a lot of stuff really fast, but it's doable in our office and in the tower.
We could have them practice that.
We can have him practice. We can do that now. Any questions? Any requests, any changes anyone would like to look at? Recall that this is the workshop. We have a meeting in August. At our regular meeting, we'll have a budget hearing. You'll pass the tentative budget at that point. And then in September, we'll have another budget hearing with our final budget. So we can make changes now up until the next meeting. We can make changes at the next meeting, but at that point, it is done.
One comment, Mr. Chairman. I will say that Ms. Calvert, who's a reporter for our local newspaper, did a fairly accurate report this morning on the budget workshop.
Yeah.
So the public will be able to get a sense of the basic parts of it. I was surprised that it wasn't left. It wasn't left.
So I mean, I think, you know, as a government entity, we do a really good job explaining what we're doing, and you know, as a not-for-profit, but a enterprise fund that has to support itself, the numbers prove it out. We're doing a good job. The board's direction to staff has been well received and well implemented. So I think.
Do you see any drastic increases in the gasoline prices, like we're seeing at our pumps here when we fill up our cars?
So we try not to look at that as much as our margin. The years that we've had huge run-ups in costs, we've maintained our margins. So I think, you know, personally, I spend most of my time reading COVID data from Europe. But, you know, I think that we're probably going to see an increase. I don't think we're going to see the decrease we usually see in the winter as the summer fuels disappear. If you look at Oshkosh, the announcements of nationwide availability of unleaded aviation fuel, both the 94 octane and the 100 octane, I think the fact that it is being manufactured and available nationwide is going to push the low lead out. As the FAA has said, they're going to eliminate leaded fuel in the next few years, and that may require us to have dual systems for a while as we have both unleaded and leaded aviation fuel. We will see. Right now, we could do it. It would be, you know, as we put in our new self-serve, we could have one with low lead, one with no lead. We may have to look at you know, different tank structures, but that's going to be a transitional period where we go from no lead to low lead to no lead.
Jim, I have a couple quick questions before we go to other commissioners, but number one, that seating for the terminal, is that low voltage plus 120, or is it just low voltage?
Probably both.
It'd be both? Gosh.
Yeah, USB as well. So we'll, you know, having a one-story building makes it a little more difficult, but we'll have power poles coming down they'll be decorative. I'm an engineer, I'd like to stick a pole there, but can't do that. They'll be decorative, usually like you see at most airports, if you're standing, there'll be a place to set your phone, charge it, but then there'll be a cord that can run under the seats, and we'll have in-seat charging as well.
And then second, that inverse relationship between the car rental and the auto parking. It seems counterintuitive. I mean, it seems that way.
Well, you know, during the winter, people are coming to visit us. During the summer, us Floridians are trying to get the heck out of the heat.
Yeah.
So we definitely see an increase in parking starting early July, July 4th weekend. We start to explode in parking, and then it'll taper off as this month ends, and then September, October are just terrible months in the travel industry as school starts, before the holiday season starts, before the snowbirds start coming down. Florida and the nation just see a real cutback in leisure travel. Hopefully, we'll start seeing commercial traffic or business travel again, although that's not a big part of our makeup. You know, when mom and dad start traveling again, the kids want to get the heck out of the house too, so they throw in a weekend at Grandma's house in Punta Gorda and Disney and go home.
Thank you, James. Any other questions for Mr. Parrish?
Just really quickly, I had some questions for Mr. Parrish yesterday, so I apologize to him if this is repeating myself, but I did think it was really interesting, the car rentals, knowing with the scarcity in the market and kind of the instability there. He did a really good job of explaining that, the $200 car rental we're making because of our particular business model, we're able to make money regardless of how many cars they have because of that increase in demand. The other thing that I was a little bit concerned about is reading a lot of opinion pages calling on the Biden administration to institute vaccine passports for domestic airline travel. So I'm really hopeful that that does not come to pass so that we can maintain our robust increase in the airline travel.
And that is something that I am, whether it's a vaccine passport, whether it's a vaccine mandate, whether it's, vaccinated people wearing masks, not wearing masks, is something that I spend way too much time diving into, looking at studies from India, studies from Great Britain, where they have seen the Delta variant spike and now start to ebb. We're 2 to 4 weeks behind them. I hope we're going to see an ebb in those cases shortly. I just read yesterday that at least 70% of the United States population that's eligible for a shot has gotten at least one. We are continuing to encourage our staff to get vaccinated because I do think that is the best way to get back to normal. We have had a few people that have gotten COVID after being vaccinated, but it was a 2 or 3 day minor cold, not a 2-week at the hospital potentially ordeal. So we're encouraged and discouraged at the same time, and we just hope that we can continue to move forward. The aviation industry, tourism in general, but the aviation industry brings 50% of the tourists to Florida. It's very big to our state. I think the governor has done an admirable job in the situation we're in. I know we disagree with some other states, but the facts have been on our side. As a very populous state, our numbers still continue to be better than some of the states that are more restrictive. So politics aside, I'm glad our airport's in Florida.
Commissioner, anything else?
Are we doing commissioner comments or no?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, we can. Yeah.
It's-
We'll save it for that. But Jim,
Sure.
you mentioned vaccinated people who then contracted COVID. Do you have the stat on unvaccinated versus catching COVID or heading to the hospital on the unvaccinated?
Well, I think if you just look at the statistics at Sarasota County, which is the one that I tend to get a lot more stats from, Dr. Pepe has been giving us a little at the county commission meetings, but they don't have meetings this month. Still 95% of the people hospitalized are unvaccinated. Mm-hmm. So less than 5% of vaccinated people are hospitalized with it, but the number is skewed towards the unvaccinated getting sick from it. And I think nationwide, last I read, there were 180,000 cases of vaccinated people, and I'm sure that's an undercount because some find out and just go home. Mm-hmm. Now that you can buy rapid tests at the store, you're not going through the government system anymore.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, but anecdotally, I've seen it. I have a friend who was vaccinated who got COVID, didn't even know it. He was jogging and found that felt a little out of breath, and decided, hey, I'll go get tested, and he was positive. So.
All right. With that being said, before we adjourn, James, is that the conclusion?
That's all I have. Like I said, any updates, any comments, please contact myself, Amy, Heather, Sandy over the next few weeks. We can make adjustments now and present those at the next meeting. At the next meeting, we have to vote on the tentative budget, and at the following meeting, vote on the final budget.
Do you see anything on the horizon that might be a problem?
No, the only thing that is out there that could throw a wrench in it is COVID shutdowns, and I'm going to be positive this year that we're not going to see anything major. Like I said, I'm following Europe and India, and I think if we follow that track, we'll be getting back to even normal with the Delta variant soon.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, James. All right, that concludes our budget presentation. I think I'll throw in, if I may, commissioner comments, if anybody has any. We'll start down here with Kathleen.
No, it seems pretty good to me. We're doing good. Just from taking my own plane trip recently, the plane was almost full, and coming back was even better. And I went to South Dakota on that new flight, and it was wonderful. Beautiful airline, beautiful plane, smooth. I recommend that trip to anybody and everybody.
That ends in 2 weeks, if you're going to go.
Oh.
Thank you, Kathleen. Commissioner Hansick.
Other than to acknowledge City Councilman from Punta Gorda, Mr. Miller is here, looking at our numbers. That's it.
That's it. Commissioner Oliver.
Just real quick, there's a quote from Bill Campbell that says, "If you have been blessed, be a blessing." And I think that Punta Gorda Airport and this airport authority is blessed not only good leadership and a successful low-cost economic model and really strong partnerships, incredible staff, and also a little bit of luck. But we now have reserves that exceed our needs. We're able to meet all of our anticipated capital improvement plans. All of our needs are being met. A lot of our wants are being met. And so because we're so blessed, I think that it is important to consider in the future how we, as an airport authority, can be a blessing to our community. What can we do going forward that will not only align with our mission and support the aviation industry, but also benefit the broader community? We do a lot of these things already. The air show is a great boon to our community. It's a huge benefit. We're doing the aviation maintenance technical school partnership. So I would just like us to keep an eye open and an open mind to other opportunities that present themselves to us where we can be a blessing, be a benefit to the community, and embark on other fruitful partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll leave that up to James. He'll probably have to have a special meeting with the FAA on that one. But with that being said, I have no more comments. James, do you have any? I would like to welcome Mr. Miller from the city, and I see we have Clyde Putnam, one of our taxi providers, I believe, and of course Betsy Calvin, our reporter, our news reporter that does a great job. But anyways, with that being said, that concludes our meeting, and this meeting is adjourned.
If anyone would like to stop by and look at the admin build-out, we have our walkthrough this afternoon. You can see how it's laid out, what we've done over there. Just for notice, I will be out tomorrow. I am moving my parents out of their house. They're moving to